Oh, the habits of my heart, I can't say no. It's ripping me apart.
Hello guys, the pleasurable delight. You get to know how they mix with each other, which type of scent their fragrance produces, and how they will taste once they touch your tongue. Oh, food! Like poetry and painting, it is impossible to resist the beauty, forms, and colors it creates when it is spread out on a table, and of course, it is even harder to refrain from tasting it. In this video, we are going to review the history of Italian cuisine from the Roman Empire to the Middle Ages. The history of Italian cuisine. When you love food, there are two things you really want to do: eat it and make it. That's why it's nice to have a well-furnished kitchen and plenty of interesting recipes to try, as well as a gang of good friends to invite over justify your spending every single weekend surrounded by pots and pans, making your best impression for a domestic goddess or god. But you know what? There is something barely stop thinking about when in the kitchen. The history behind what we are making and eating. Have you ever thought of it? You guys on the other side of the pond are usually more aware of it, as your cuisine is a delicious melting pot of flavors and cultures hailing from every corner of the earth, the heritage and the history of which is usually well rooted in the community. The history of Italian cuisine, however, is as long and rich as the country's history itself. Its origins lean deep into ancestral history of Rome, its people, and its political, cultural, and social power. Italian cuisine has evolved and changed following the evolution and the changes of Italy itself. Throughout centuries of wars, cultural mutations, and contracts, it's a history as rich, colorful, and fascinating as the most amazing of recipes. This is what we are going to tell you today. A tale of food, traditions, kings, and warriors, the centuries-long tale of Italian kitchens, the history of Italian cuisine, the Roman Empire, and the early Middle Ages. Our ancestors, the Romans, loved feasting and on food. The banquet wasn't simply a moment of social conviviality, but also the place where new dishes were served and tried. The empire embraced the flavors and ingredients of many of the lands it had conquered. Spices from the Middle East, fish from the shores of the Mediterranean, and cereals from the fertile plains of North Africa. Imperial Rome was the ultimate fusion cuisine hotspot. The Romans saw, contrarily to how we are today, liked complex, intricate flavors, and their dishes often required sophisticated preparation techniques. Ostrich meats, fish sauces, roasted game, all watered by liters of red wine, mixed with honey and water, never failed to appear on the table of Rome's rich and famous. Of course, we are talking about the jet set here, certainly not about the majority of people who were much. On the other hand, based their diet on the simple union of three things and the products made of them: the wine, the olive, and cereals. This was called Mediterranean diet, and is still today considered central to the diet known worldwide as Mediterranean diet. Wine, olive oil, and bread, then plus healthy helpings of vegetables, legumes, and cheese. This is what we people of Rome would eat on daily basis. The coming of the barbarians in the peninsula didn't only cause the end of Roman Empire, but also that of such a traditions of, let us say, banqueting in style. These rugged-looking, harsh-speaking people from Central and Northern Europe had very little in common with Romans and their lifestyle. As it always happens when cultures meet and clash, the two influenced each other, also in the kitchen. The barbarians, who as a matter of fact ended up being the last straw needed to provoke the fatal collapse of the Roman Empire, but who embraced with pure eagerness all that was Roman culturally, spiritually, and socially. Introduced the consumption of butter and beer, whereas the Romans passed up onto them a taste for wine and olive oil. History of Italian cuisine, the Middle Ages. Different was the culinary passage into the Middle Ages of Sicily, which since the 9th century had became an Arabic colony. Islands embarrassed the exotic habits and tastes of their colonizers. A fact mirrored also in their cuisine. Spices and dried fruit became a common concoction and are still often found in Sicilian dishes. Many may not know that dried pasta today, a quintessentially Italian scene, was brought to the country specifically to Sicily by the Arabs, who appreciated the fact it was easy to carry and preserve, hence perfect for long sea trips and sigs. From the ports of Sicily, dried pasta made its way to those of Naples and Genoa, as well as France and Spain. So, contrary to what we hear often when talking about history of pasta, it wasn't Marco Polo that brought noodles to Italian shores. This is how we can truly say an Italian legend was born. It wasn't only the influence of other populations to change and influence the Italian way of cooking and eating in the early centuries of Middle Ages, but also that of religion. After Constantine declared Christianity a legal religion of the empire, and especially after it became the sole imperial religion with the Edict of Thessalonica in 380, under reign of Emperor Theodosius I, Christianity began exercising heavy regulations upon people's behaviors and habits, including the way they eat. Food and eating were strongly associated with sin and with sexuality. Pride, of course, was Adam and Eve's sin, but it did manifest itself through acts of a woman who ate the forbidden fruit. As a consequence, spiritual perfection could be obtained through abstinence and fasting, and in particular through renunciations to meat consumption. Very much up to the year 1000, the monks of Italy and of the whole of Europe, as a matter of fact, ate a strict diet of bread and legumes, with very spare additions of cheese and eggs on allowed days, along with some seasonal fruit. The meat was considered a dangerous element, not only for its symbolic meaning. It was refused as food both because its production involved an act of blatant violence, the killing of an animal, but also because it was considered an energetic food, which could provoke in its consumers unclean desires and passions. In other words, medieval Christians thought meat could make you lose your chastity more easily than salad. Roman banquets and barbarians' habit to eat meat continuously on one side, Christian restraint of the other. The duality came to an end when Charlemagne managed to reconcile the two by declaring righteous an alternation of ascetic fasting with days of pleasurable fasting. When even religious authorities and the faithful could give could give in to the pleasures of the table and consider it an offering to the greatness and goodness of God. And what about castles and their inhabitants? Did they eat what did they eat in the Middle Ages? Let's have a look into that side of the history of Italian cuisine. Early Middle Ages as society. The social structure built around the castle and its lord had become by the 11th century organized in an autocratic economical system, which allowed most of its members to eat regularly and with relative ease. The lord of the castle, of course, was one with a fuller stomach, but even to him and his family food was from being a gastronomic matter, up to when living in the cities flourished again. In Italy, before then everywhere else, and people's mores became, once again, more refined. Medieval banqueting remained closer to barbaric food feasts than to old, lavish and harmonious Roman banquets.